So I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two, where I share my harrowing escape from Mormon Tradwife life. And you're on Girl Talk Live with myself and the amazing
Beth Magnetic from Mormon True Crime. Because you're not crazy. There is a lot of Mormon true crime, and I like to help you to understand whether the cases that you're hearing about are actually Mormon influenced or the people just happen to be Mormon.
I love that. And we have a lot of conversations about that. So I've been talking a lot over on my YouTube about Mormon influencers and why they're such a big deal. So I've been texting back and forth with you this week about this absolute epiphany that I had one day because I was trying to find some of our Christmas stuff and I was going through all the decorations. I was finding so many things that I had made over the years, or my mom had made over the years, or my grandma had made over the years in Mormon homemaking. And as I was pulling all of these things out of our like Rubbermaid boxes, Beth, it hit me. There are so many articles, so many books, so many videos out there about why Mormon influencers are so successful, why we can't stop watching them. Like, why is Ballerina Farm Ballerina Farm? Why are any of these people doing the things that they do? And it dawned on me, within the Mormon religion, there is a lifestyle training program that starts when you're really, really young and goes throughout your entire life. And I learned like every little skill that I have came from homemaking, young women's, girls camp. And we used to call it Mary Miss, but now it's called, I think, the Achievement Days girls. And
I
I
think
don't know
it's
if
activity days now.
is it activity days now?
Mhm.
I
So
don't
I
know
think
any of the
boys do activity days and girls do activity days
Okay.
instead of
So
scouts.
church. All right. So they're both doing it.
Yep.
So I went from Mormon to Christian. You just went from the Mormon church to non-attendance in any religion, correct?
Correct.
And when I went to the Christian church, which I was like doing Bible studies and the women's groups, and then there was a single parents thing, and then I'd go to church on Sundays. Like I do super hard into Christianity, thinking Mormonism had kept me from having a relationship with Jesus. So finally, me and Jesus can be besties. So I really, really threw myself into Christianity for almost 5 years. And I noticed right off the bat, like when I first started at this Christian church up there in Gilbert, Arizona, they don't have any there's no crafting, there's no cooking classes. Everything that I went to was biblically based. It was just like, let's just read the scriptures and learn stuff about Jesus and the gospel and like heaven and hell, blah, blah, blah. But we didn't learn any skills. And I remember asking, do we ever have any craft classes or anything? And these Christian women just like scratching their head and like, craft classes.
Why would we do that?
What do you think about my theory that a lot of the why behind the Mormon influencer effect is this comprehensive it's a Tradwife immersion program that the Mormon church has had for a century and a half.
Oh, 100%. So I told you this earlier, and I'm going to give the TikTok version of this, but I went on a psilocybin journey at one point. And on said journey, I saw myself with generations of Mormon women. And I realized that we had been trained generation to generation for how to present ourselves, for how to be creative, how to speak, how to do art, how to do music, how to use the arts and use nurturing and creativity to be able to help people to have emotional experiences that move them along a path. And that's what influencers and brands and content creators are doing. I've talked to so many people who did not grow up Mormon, and they have so much fear of turning that camera on and talking. They have that anxiety of speaking to crowds, but we begin public speaking when we're 3 in front of crowds.
I remember the very first time. Yeah.
I don't remember the very
It was a
first
brand
time.
new Sunbeam. My mom was the primary courser. So Sunbeams are 3. That's when you graduate from the little kids nursery and go into like the children's ministry, I guess we'd call it. It's called primary in Mormonism. And I had only been in for a few weeks. And I still remember because it was so traumatizing. I was asked to give a talk in the little children's ministry. So even within the children's ministry, it's not just like the adult pastors that are doing all of this stuff. Within Mormonism, every single member of the church runs the programs. So there's no pastor that speaks in church on Sunday, and that's a huge factor too. Now we're crossing into like two different things. Okay, so we'll talk about the women's program in a minute. The way the church is run, it's all the people that run the church. There is no bishop giving the talks on Sunday. Every single Sunday, they rotate through all of the families in the ward. My mom and dad would give talks, and then some of his kids would also talk at the same time. Like when I was 12 years old, I might speak with my family, and then we would sing songs and stuff. So in the children's ministry, like your main service at your Christian church type of thing, and there was a little mini pulpit, and it had a little microphone and everything. And I had to go up to this little microphone. My mom had prepared this little talk, and she drew little pictures, and she was going to whisper in my ear. And I got up there and I just like froze. And actually, my mom didn't go up. She was sitting in the back. I froze. And I'm like, Mommy, I can't do this without you. So then she came and whispered my whole talk in my ear. And just that fear of standing in front of like 50 other little kids who are all staring at you, and you have this microphone that you've never used before. So from age 3, Beth, we had microphones. We would speak in sacrament meeting. We would sing. There was the primary program every year that every single child in the congregation would do this one Sunday where you had solos and speaking parts. And I played the piano, so I was always playing the piano and stuff. Like, didn't you do a lot of performing in
Yes.
this church?
It's not even like every member a missionary, it's every member a performer, every member an entertainer. You're trained to do all of the arts basically in public performances and to get over your stage fright from the time that you're a small child. And this is one of the things where I'm like, I'm glad that the church did give me this. I think it's an awesome and great skill to have. And like, Jenny, if we didn't have the skill set, how would we have ever built these brands? We wouldn't have any influence without this skill set. I'm not sure. Maybe you think
My
we would.
entire life, I was speaking in front of a congregation of 500 people as a young woman. I was the organist from the time I was 12. So I had to be really comfortable with sitting up in front of an entire congregation. Sometimes I did state conference, which was more like 2,000 or 3,000 people. When I was at Rick's College from age 17, I was one of the rotating organists at, which is now BYU, Idaho. And I think that our student body at the time was between 10 and 14,000 people. So I learned as a 17-year-old how to sit at the organ in front of 10,000 other college students and work through my nerves and work through all of that performing. We had so many performance opportunities. And then other things like going out with the missionaries on splits and knocking on doors and like trying to figure out like, how can I have the sweetest personality so that this person will let me in so I can talk to them about the Book of Mormon. And
we were also raised from infancy to be tradwives. And I would say before infancy, before primary, like from infancy, we were trained in nursery and whatnot. You exist to grow up, get married in the temple, have babies, and live with them in the eternities. That's it.
Yeah, you're infused with that doctrine from a really young age. I was a nursery leader, and you're right. Like we'd have these little lessons that we're giving to like 18-month-old kids. Here's Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother. You have a body. You came to earth because Heavenly Father, and here's mommies and daddies. Infuse the kids with the doctrines really early on. So starting at age 9, that's where the women started to be trained in so many skills. Because I was kind of going through and making a list for a YouTube video that I did. I don't know of any other just regular female raised in America who is infused with such a diversity of skills as Mormons. And that's one of the huge factors as to why they're so interesting on camera.
We bake, we cook, we clean, we do art, we entertain. We are jacks of all trades and encouraged to be master of them all, right? This is Fluttershy. She's here for you too, Casey.
So with the activity days, girls, I remember, and I think that starts at age 9, right? 9
Yeah.
or 10. When does that
So.
start?
8, maybe.
I don't even remember. I'm 50, so like I forget, and I've never had that calling, but I remember my girls doing it really young. It's usually every other week, and it'll be like a Wednesday afternoon after school. And the thing with Mormonism too is that there's so many highly skilled people in a congregation, and you have your dentists and your massage therapists and makeup people and interior decorators and like all of these different types of people. And they get put into these callings or they just volunteer to help in some of these women's training groups. So, like in activity days, I remember learning from like age 9, like we did like stained glass windows, and we just happened to have a lady in the ward who was a stained glass artist. And she taught us how to put together all these things, and we worked on them forever. I learned how to quilt. Like I could probably, well, I learned how to use all of the saws and stuff to do woodwork. So I could go down to Lowe's, saw my own quilting frame. I could patch together the quilt. I could roll it. Like I can tie quilts, or I can just do your regular quilts that you patch together. And so I can do all types of different quilts. I learned that in activity days. So every other week, we would learn a different skill. I learned how to make homemade lip gloss. I learned how to make perfume. Obviously, tons of
embroidery, crust.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
All
my
of
God,
it.
my cross stitching phase was so hardcore. I did an entire tablecloth. What did you cross stitch?
I remember we cross stitched something, a saying or a temple or something, and then we put it on a pillow. I think we also did cross stitch on hankies for a temple. What's the word for it?
The Hosanna shout, temple
Yeah,
dedication.
my whole family cross stitched Christmas ornaments one year. Totally.
We learned how to make
Yeah,
all kinds
I
of
loved it
ornaments and
too.
stuff. I loved it. It was the best part of being a Mormon.
Yeah. Dory, yeah, I completely agree. Like, I would love if we could take, if the ex Mormon women could make little clubs to do these things.
So I've had so many YouTube followers this week saying, please start a non-religious homemaking. People
What
have
if we
never,
do it like a subscription box and then we just send them this stuff and then they get that once a month?
yeah, but they want it for free and they want the community. So I say we start something like what's up, Greek Mops. I say we start something where we're teaching the women getting together in different towns doing stuff. So starting at age 8 or 9, you do that every other week. And then once you hit age 12, so 12 to 18, you're in the Young Women's program. That Young Women's program is Tradwife immersion. And every single Wednesday, you have an activity. And a lot of those activities are learning how to make sourdough, learning how to make cinnamon rolls, I learned how to iron my husband's shirt when I was 12. All kinds of different crafts, all kinds of different skills, learning how to budget. We made homemade paper one time where we like mulched a bunch of toilet paper and had these little screens. And then we dried and pressed flowers and all kinds of little herbs. And we had all the like organic rye that we like harvested by taking a mortar and pestle and grinding down different flowers and herbs from our backyards, and dyed the paper, pressed the paper, made homemade stationery and envelopes every single week. We were learning skills like that as Mormon girls. I don't know of any other church where the community comes together and teaches those skills. And then girls' camp and other activities were like girls' camp. I loved the crafts.
I love girls' camp. Girls' camp was like my jam because I don't know, typical people would call feminine, right? And so, like, girls' camp, I'm like, oh, let me go build a fire and build some stuff and put a tent together. I'm very mechanically minded. Give me the stuff to go build and do things. And I'm all over that. And Maryland Exmo, we were super relaxed. So agree on girls' camp. Yeah, I loved girls' camp. And I love getting to cook food over the fire and
for dinners, Dutch ovens, like all of those skills I learned from Mormon Girls Camp.
it's like they programmed us to be tradwives. Some of this, we got to have some really cool experiences that other people don't get. And I do like that. Do I like the indoctrination around it? No. But the community, it's great.
I have to say, It's amazing to have those skills, though. Girls' camp was its own different thing. And when I started going to girls' camp, we actually went like an old scout camp. So we had all the cabins and everything, and it was 10 days. So we started on a Sunday, went through the next Saturday, and then went home on that Monday. So it was this huge, big, long thing. We did all of our hikes and everything at camp. And just at girls' camp, I learned canoeing, kayaking. We did polar bear swims every morning, every first aid certification. Like I left girls camp every year with tons of like first aid, CPR, um, I don't know, different wound care, snake bites. I know how to like chop a prickly pear off of the prickly pear. What is it? Succulent.
Wow.
Peel it, eat it. I know how to wild harvest all kinds of different food, cook it, prepare it, dry it, what to do in an emergency, hiking skills, all kinds of stuff from girls' camp. Like that was its own thing. Very non-Tradwife. And in some ways, Mormonism also has so many components of prepperism and survival that, like, don't you feel like on social media, all of the Tradwives are like the 1950s, like high heels type of stuff? The Mormon Tradwives, we were pioneer based. The pioneers came across the plains. They were totally self-reliant, like Survivor Island type of stuff. So the Mormon Tradwife training program is very prepperish with a big pioneer underpinning that made girls camp really unique. And then there's all kinds of painting skits. Like I
Yeah.
learned how to write scripts.
Yeah.
We had a camp beauty pageant every year. That was actually my idea as a leader one year. I was a senior in high school. So many leadership opportunities too. And all of these women's classes that we did in girls camp.
So I think it's really interesting because in activity days and young women's, like we had so many of these opportunities. And yes, there were some of those once you grow up and get married, but it's honestly like that super fun part of Mormonism is just gone once you're in the Relief Society.
It is, because then you have so much responsibility. But once we morph into the Relief Society, then as a young woman, like 18 years old is when you start Relief Society. I started at 17 because I went to college at 17 and there wasn't young women's at college. Imagine that. In Relief Society, on Sundays, you're learning relationship skills, you're learning communication skills, like the Relief Society lessons, especially the old manuals, which were less spiritual and more like homemaking type of stuff. You learned how to manage your household on Sundays and things like that. And then I was in a ward that chose to have homemaking every single Wednesday night for years. And every Wednesday, I would go down to the church. They would have a full dinner in Scottsdale, Paradise Valley ward. And then we would learn all kinds of different skills like jewelry making. I learned how to cut my bangs at homemaking. I learned how to cut my kids' hair at homemaking. Like all these different skills that nobody else ever learns anywhere.
I was living in Alaska. I think we did real weird things in Alaska when I was a young mom. And so I only,
In the sun,
what's that?
you dried salmon in the sun.
We went like out with nets and caught salmon in nets and did a lot of very wilderness kind of activity. We went out to like cabins, we went fishing, I'm trying to remember if we were doing these like with the church or not, but anyway, I don't know. I remember much more like Samantha Koenig getting kidnapped by Israel Keys than I remember going to church there. I remember going to the temple as much as I could because I was trying to feel something and I remember feeling nothing. And that led me to leaving. You know why I don't remember, Jenny? Because I was in the Young Women's presidency.
You're in the Young Women's presidency.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so I was doing stuff with young women.
What about that
at
young
point.
personal progress project?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So we were talking about this. I completed my young womanhood recognition program. And I remember I had to memorize tons of scriptures. I had to study a bunch of church doctrine. I had to sew buttons. I had to take buttons off. I had to stitch things up. I remember it was like you were mentioning, it's like Tradwife training. They had this booklet and you had to check all the things off and then your parent had to sign it off. And then your Young Women's presidency member had to sign it off and that type of thing. And you had the set skills that you were supposed to learn, and they were 100% Tradwife skills.
And the Young Women's values are what that program is based on. It's kind of like Scouts. I was born in 1974 and I had the old Young Women's Personal Progress when it was more like, I don't know, learn how to whip honey and quilt and things like that. And then I think when I was 13 years old, somewhere in there, they introduced the new Personal Progress and the new Young Women's theme, which has all the different values. The Young Women's values are faith, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice, and accountability, good works, and integrity. And you get this goal setting book, very similar to like a Boy Scout
They
manual.
added virtue.
Yeah, they've added virtue. And did they add something else since I left the church? I don't even know.
Virtue was the last one I knew that
Yeah,
they
we have
added.
a 1970s person. Go 1970s babes. And so you'd have a different little section for each thing. So the faith section, you had like 4 goals from every section that you had to check off every year. And if anyone's interested in the current LDS, Young Women's Personal Progress, you can Google it and find everything on LDS.org. They have a very interactive landing page for the Young Women's Personal Progress. So in faith, you may have things like set a goal to say your prayers every morning for a month, or memorize a scripture every week, or write your testimony in the Book of Mormon and give that away. For divine nature, it might be something like get your temple recommend and go do some baptisms for the dead. And every year you would have goals that you set from age 12 until you graduated from Young Women's and went into Relief Society. And when you got to some of the things like individual worth, knowledge, good works, things like that, then you got into some of the crafty things. I think that the quilt that I started and didn't completely finish was for my Young Women's project, because it was like the knowledge base one was learn how to play the piano, learn to cook new recipes and cook something for your family every Sunday after church, learn how to quilt. And for the good works, there was a lot of bake bread and take it to your neighbor. If you have a baby brother or sister, change their diaper. So 4 goals, I believe, from every section every 2 years. So 2 a year. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think something like that.
So it was a pretty big thing when you checked those off. I don't know of any other religion that has a young women's program that teaches you so many skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bless you.
Thank you. Jenny, we're talking about these things and we're talking about it in a very nostalgic, like feel good way overall.
It was my favorite thing about the church, hands down.
So what's the problem? What's the problem with it?
I wish that it was separated from religion. And for me, I'm an anti-theist. So I believe that I believe the evidence that shows that religion causes harm to humans, both as individuals and collectively as a society. And that we would be better off if we had these organic, natural, spontaneous connections and societal, social interactions separate from religion. If this was done on its own with just women in a community getting together and learning these skills, that would be okay for me. These always came with a lot of indoctrination and a lot of forced religion. I was forced to attend all of these as a young woman. Like, I wasn't allowed to get my driver's license until I had almost finished my personal progress. So there was a lot of coercion, a lot of force, a lot of pressure. And it didn't bother me when I was a girl growing up. But once I started raising my own daughters, I was in Boy Scouts for many years. And when I became the Cub Committee chair and I saw all of the amazing things that we were doing with Cub Scouts and all of the tens of thousands of dollars that our ward was spending on Cub Scout activities, when the Young Women had like a $600 budget, I had just come from the Young Women's presidency, transferred into Cub Committee chair, and seeing the amazing things that the Scouts were doing compared and very diverse. And I guess that was like the male female divide. Like the girls were learning stuff that would only help them in a home. They were learning to be wives. The boys were learning stuff that was going to generate revenue for them, survival skills, a lot of like real world leadership skills and opportunities that the girls were having, and dissociated a little bit from the Young Women's Training Program as a mom. because like my girls would beg to be involved in scouts. They're like, why can't we do scouts? Why do I have to crochet a potholder Wednesday night when Mason's off on this high adventure kayaking the Colorado? And I started to see as a mom this gender divide, right? The gender gap in Mormonism, I think is problematic.
So
So they
Jennifer asked, was that your family or the church? Jenny grew up on the West Coast. I grew up on the East Coast, and we had the same experience. So this was not just like Jenny's family or where Jenny was from. This was systemic.
yeah, that's doctrinal.
I also have baggage with certain things that I learned in Young Women's. So, like, I learned canning and I learned like food based stuff. And as somebody who has the level of allergies that I have, canning my own stuff would be so good for me. But I have this mental baggage with it that makes it so that I'm like, ooh, nope, that's a little too preppery. That's a little too end of the world, apocalyptic. And so I can't get past it and do this thing that I actually would enjoy because there's this doctrinal tie to it.
But I think we just had too much of it too. Like it was, so our Relief Society homemaking was every single week. So it's like at a certain point, it gets exhausting. And the only reason that we were able to do that every week, and I was in the Relief Society presidency for a while in that ward. So I was actually helping organize these things every single week. And the only reason we could do that is that all the women stayed home. They were all Tradwives. They didn't have jobs. So they're like taking care of the kids. And they're like, we have to get out of the house. So let's get together and do this. I think you just like reach your quota by the time you're like 26 years old. I did some math for a YouTube video that I did about how the Mormon women's training program leads to like really interesting Mormon influencers who have all kinds of different skill sets. And if I was going to homemaking every week and then maybe every other week and then maybe once a month, I did the math on it. And then I started in the Young Women's program and the Activity Days girls. By age 44, I had something like 1,800 individual training classes in all kinds of different things.
Yeah. It that's one of the things too, is that when you're in the church, you're doing activities with the church several days a week.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're really involved, it dictates what you're doing with your schedule most of the week. And so then all of a sudden you remove that and you've lost your community. You've lost this entire support system and structure. And it just feels like your entire life is chaotic. What do I even do without this extreme structure that existed for me?
There was not a day in my life that I wasn't doing something church related. From Sunday, Monday night family home evening, we'd have friends over Monday night. Sometimes we had Tuesday night youth group, scouts, maybe Thursdays. We might have a break on Thursdays, but we'd be at like our little whistle ball team with Mason or soccer with one of the kids or dance or something with all of our Mormon friends and temple night Fridays. Sometimes we'd have ward things. We'd clean the church a lot, service things, working at the farms, and then church again on Sunday. Every day of our life was, and then throughout our day, it was family scripture study, getting the kids to seminary, having our prayers, blessing the food, our own personal scripture study. Like it is, Mormonism is intense. It's an intense training program. Beth, would you say that you consider that one of the negatives too, is that they want to keep you so connected through those activities. So
You don't know what to do without them.
yeah, you don't know what to do without them. And they just become like your everything. So yes, certainly all of the training that I received, like literally from like professional photographers that I would have never had some of these classes if he just hadn't been some guy in the ward who came to teach the Relief Society. And like all of these unbelievable training classes that I had as a Mormon woman, they were amazing, but they are used as a tool to keep people connected. Because Mormonism, like so many other cults and high demand religions, these things that want to keep you really stuck, they have to have things to offer you that make you want to show up.
Yes.
So if church on Sunday isn't working for you, you're questioning the Book of Mormon, you're going to go to that Wednesday night activity with the famous photographer who's coming to teach you all how to use your cameras a little better. You're going to go to that thing with the artist who's illustrated 50 children's books, who's going to show you how to shade and color your own little family illustrations, you're going to go to those things and they're a hook. They're
Yeah.
bait to get people to show up at church. And then once you show up at church, you start to bond. Like, even talking about this, I can remember sitting at those big round church tables in the cultural hall with all these other women and the little Relief Society tablecloths, and that connection that you have being there with women that you see week after week. Mormonism is really distinctive too, because the wards are geographical. So you only see the same people. You can't decide that you're going to go to a church right across town. You live in the neighborhood where all of the people who go to your building are. And there is no like Easter and Sunday Mormons. If
No.
you're a believing Mormon, you're there every Sunday. I did not ever miss a Sunday in my entire life unless I was hospitalized or sick. And I even left the hospital one Sunday to go to sacrament meeting on the way home from having my second baby. Baby, sacrament meeting, then I went home.
And so here's the thing is that I definitely was a Jack Mormon. I cussed. I definitely didn't drink coffee. I had drank alcohol before I left the church at one point, but I was definitely a Jack Mormon, but I still was completely believing and attending as often as possible. Even as the lax Mormon, who showed my cleavage and wore my skirts a little bit short and my garments would show and people would be tugging my clothes to cover up my garments.
Not the cleavage, Beth.
The cleavage. The most scandalous thing.
And yet men can run around with their shirts off. That's its own separate topic.
So with that topic, my ex-husband, his mom was like, no, you're not allowed to take your shirt off when you go outside to do
Yard work and
yard
stuff.
work. And he took that to heart so strong. If it wasn't the 3 S's, if the 3 S's were not actively happening, shower and swimming, then he had his shirt on, covered, very modest. And then there's my little Jack Mormon heathen self that was like, this is all done.
I've been a little bit more Jack Mormon-y. I never took my garments off when I was in the hospital with my ovarian tumor, had my near-death experience, and they wouldn't let me have my garments on because they had just cut me open, so I had surgical scars and stuff. Like, they had reasons. I was devastated. So I had Jake lay my garments over me and then put my hospital gown over the top just so they could be on my skin. I wish I'd been a little more Jack.
My goodness. That was a disappointment to my entire world. My mother-in-law, she sat me down when my ex-husband and I were about to get engaged to make me bear my testimony to her because she just didn't feel like I had a strong enough testimony to marry her son. And then I left the church. So I proved her right. So.
Oh my God, that's so awkward. So Jake used to bear his testimony to me all the time. Like, sometimes we'd say our family prayers together and he'd be like, Jenny, I just want to bear my testimony to you. And he would literally just, I want you to know that I know that the church is true. And with all of my heart, I believe Joseph Smith to be the prophet of the restoration. We'd be just like sitting next to each other on the couch and he'd like bear his testimony. But that's what good Mormon husbands do. Right.
See, my Mormon husband was never like a Peter Priesthood kind of guy. One of the things that we bonded over was that I didn't care that he went golfing on Sundays. And I know, right? So that's part of like why we got engaged and whatnot, was because I was just a lax Mormon.
Never golfed on Sundays. I never bought milk on Sundays. We would run out of eggs and I wouldn't go to the store. In my entire life, the only time I've ever gone to the grocery store on Sundays was like if somebody had a fever and we had to go get like the baby Tylenol. That's it. If somebody had a prescription that they needed, but probably in my entire life, and I left the church at age 44. I'd probably only been to the store on Sundays like 12 times ever.
One of the things that the caveats I want to give to me saying that I was a Jack Mormon, I was not a Jack Mormon with studying the church or my belief in it. Like, I believed it 100% through and through, but I felt like things like not golfing on Sunday were more cultural, not cussing, more cultural. and not being like the perfect tradwife. That was all like me, like, it's the culture, not the church, right? It was really interesting for me to actually break away from it and see that you can be very devoutly believing, but still be practicing it your own way. I grew up in Maine. Mainers do not Mormon the same way that Arizonans Mormon.
We don't use that term Jack Mormon that much anymore. It's either Mormon, anti-Mormon, nuanced Mormon, ex-Mormon. Then we have all the plebeians and I don't know. Yeah.
That's Jack Mormon right there.
Yeah. Like growing up, the Jack Mormons were like, they would get up in church on Sunday smelling like cigarettes with a tattoo and wearing jeans to church instead of the suit and tie. They'd stand in the pulpit and bear their testimony that they knew that Joseph Smith was a prophet and the church was true. The
Yep.
Jack Mormons are probably like opposite of the physically in, mentally out. They are mentally in, physically out.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say? They're hopos. They're mentally in, physically out. They're meepos. Yeah, I
Yes.
think we just came up with a new term.
That was me.
Yeah. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah.
Beth has started a new hashtag for the ex-Mormon community. It's meepos. I have some cousins who are like, they call themselves, we're Jack Mormons. 100% believe in the Book of Mormon, believe in Joseph Smith, believe in all of it. They don't go to church because they think that Russell Nelson is messed up, and they drink wine because Joseph Smith drank wine, and I think Brigham Young messed everything up. So they're mythos.
That's so funny. Yeah, my uncle asked me to go on his podcast and talk about Brigham Young's corruption. Now, my uncle is definitely a Meepo for sure. So he believes in reincarnation, some of the obscure teachings of Joseph Smith, drinks coffee, very Meepo. But it was really interesting to be able to have this conversation of, I'm not pro. No, I told him, I'm not pro Joseph Smith. But if I was pro Joseph Smith, I could never be pro Brigham Young. And Brigham Young is just, yeah, exactly. And so I just would say, I don't know.
Okay, Kevin and I were in Cedar City, Utah on vacation last year after seeing my grandbaby, who's the cutest grandbaby in the world. And there were some Fundies in the Smith's grocery store. And we were like all waiting in line. I was getting like some deli meat or something. So I was waiting in line at the Smith's grocery store. And there's all these Fundy wives, like 3 or 4 of them. And they're all ordering coffees.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, hey.
It's not against the rules for them.
Well, of course I have to talk to him. I'm like, hey, I was regular Mormon and we don't drink coffee. Why are you guys drinking coffee? And they're like, yeah, we have the Joseph Smith Church. Joseph Smith did not ban coffee. The word of wisdom is just a suggestion, and you can drink coffee if you want to. We don't necessarily believe. Oh, she said it doesn't say coffee. It says hot drinks. So we don't want to burn our tongue. So she's getting in the iced coffee. And it's like, damn, I belong to the wrong Mormon.
Warren Jeffs, one of his things that he had them do was he would have somebody at a very specific time every day bring coffee with, what is it, MC something oil into him. He had like bulletproof coffee every day at a specific time.
Yeah, like the coconut oil, like the ultra
MCT.
refined.
Yeah, MCT oil. That's right. And then there's a question. So would it be Jack Mormons who drink coffee? That's what we would have classified them as.
I have to say, I actually have a lot of respect for the Jack Mormons. Again, I'm 50. I'm pushing 51, Beth. So I have 16 years on you, right? So my generation growing up, like the Jack Mormons seemed so rebellious and so evil to me. Now that I'm an adult, the Jack Mormons were just being authentic. Like they cut through all of the crap. We're not here for the cultural stuff. We're not here for just to be part of a cult. They believed the gospel and they believed the spiritual aspect, but they didn't buy into all of the Utah rules and I guess the lifestyle stuff.
That was like what happened to me when I moved to Rexburg, was that I went from Maine, where we practice Mormonism very different than y'all. And so then I come to Rexburg and it is literally like Stepford. Take care of those babies, but they're not going to give you coffee to do it. Oh, it was one of the most upsetting, like, this is abuse things to me.
That's what you're saying is if the Mormon church would bring back coffee, maybe a red wine in the evening, And we have the tank top garments now. Like it's not we, they. Why am I
They.
still we? We get in Mormon mode and I just
Programming.
yeah, I digress. What is it?
I believe that Joseph Smith was a fraud, but I still identify as Mormon. Culturally, I will always be Mormon. And so I would really love to still have my Mormon community. And so I went to church that Sunday after I wrote her that letter, went to Relief Society, and a member of the Relief Society presidency stood up and said, if you don't believe that Joseph Smith is a prophet, you don't belong here.
Kudos to you for being a Jack Mormon. I think that takes more strength because for me, like the Mormon church was really affirming because I was just born white and delightsome. And that's an actual scripture from the Book of Mormon here. I have so many Book of Mormons now, more than I've ever had in my entire life. I was born like musically talented in this big Mormon family, and like Mormonism worked for me. I actually got more positive feedback just being myself. I never wanted to push against it because I wanted to fit in. It's hard to listen to your voice and stand out. I think that I'm just naturally like the way that I am.
Had a real weird childhood, and so I've just never felt like I belong anywhere. And so for me, it would be far stranger to go somewhere and fit in. But for me, I think it's part of my version of autism is that I cannot fake it. I cannot pretend. I cannot like, oh, let me just do what everybody else is doing. Because I look around and I'm like, why are you doing that? Explain the logic to me. Explain systematically, logically, using facts, make it make sense. And
I love that about you.
I don't have it.
I love that about you. It's one of my favorite things. If somebody says 10% of your income is too much, I have done a couple of videos about how when I was dying of an ovarian tumor and I would die and have a near-death experience, my bishop and stake president came to my home one night so that they could give me my temple recommend. And while they were there, they mentioned that we hadn't tithed for, I don't even know how long, like 6 months. Like I didn't pay the tithing. I didn't have the job. But they're like, for you to get your temple recommend, we need to update you on tithing. And so Jake whipped out the checkbook. Like we're in my bedroom. I'm in a hospital bed in my bedroom. I was dying. I was not expected to live. I wanted to renew my temple recommend because I felt like that was like my stamp on my passport to get into the celestial kingdom. So when my bishop and stake president offered to come over that night, I was like, this is such a blessing. Like I remember at the time it being very emotional and just the tender mercy of Heavenly Father that my priesthood leaders would take that time to come over. And one or the other of them, either the bishop or the stake president gave me a priesthood blessing while he was there. And it was just really beautiful and really emotional and connective that these men would come sit on my hospital bed with me, give me my temple recommend interviews. And so as they're leaving, Jake takes out the checkbook and he writes out a couple $1,000s in a tithing check and hands it to them so that I can be a full tithe payer and get my get my temple recommend. And it wasn't until I told this story and it wasn't until I started feedback from people on, I think it was my TikTok, that I was like, oh, that was really wild that they collected tithing from a woman who was dying of an ovarian tumor and her husband and 5 kids, rather than like somebody said, why didn't they come to your house and give you a check? Well, I spent 3 years fighting for my life from a tumor. I would have a medical bankruptcy. We would barely stay afloat as a family because my youngest was 8 months old when I was diagnosed with the tumor. And I was critically ill for 3 years. My ex-husband was taking care of everybody. We had 5 kids under the age of 11. It was insane, plus running a business and just life in general. And we still paid tithing. We paid a full tithing. We'd still pay fast offerings, partly because I felt like if I passed away, I needed to be a full tithe payer. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to go to the celestial kingdom and live with my family. I believed that 10% tithing was crucial, that my being with my family again, I was 36 years old. I barely made it out alive. I barely survived. And I believed that those young children that I was afraid I might leave behind, and I almost did, that I would never see them again if I didn't pay that 10% tithing.
Mm-hmm.
Beth,
They hold your family hostage.
Tell me that's not sick. So yeah, I did these videos and it's like, and then the vision of the stake president, and then Jake right out of, now that I've left the church, I'm like, that was not nice. That was not beautiful. That was not some inspirational thing. That was bullshit. They came to the home of a dying woman
Yep.
and walked away with a check for a few
Yep.
thousand.
Yep.
So afraid that I was going to die and not go to the social kingdom with my family.
I have two things. Anonymous had asked about the crime in Provo from Joycey. Hi, Mormon true crime. One of the things that's really wild about the state of Utah is in 2022, according to the FBI, they were 6th in the nation for SA convictions. So they have lower violent crime, but they have much higher SA than other places.
It's Utah, Idaho, California, Arizona, which are also the highest demographic per capita LDS states, are some of the top 10. I don't know currently who's the number one.
Yeah, I looked it up recently, but Utah is the only one that stuck with me. The other thing was my ex-husband. This is gonna make you mad, Jenny. So
Sit down.
the bishop in my ward, he came to my ex-husband and he said, "We know that the only reason that you're not paying tithing is because your ex-wife is so anti-Mormon and she won't let you. So we want to give you a temple recommend based on the fact that she won't let you pay tithing." And he ended up saying to them, um, "No, we don't pay tithing. I don't pay tithing because I don't want to pay tithing because I think it's stupid. You guys have enough money. I don't pay tithing because I don't want to." But they were willing to give him a temple recommend because I'm such an evil wife. And they didn't want to keep him from that because I'm so wicked.
Beth, my mom and dad were not at my wedding because my dad hadn't paid tithing for a couple of years because he started a business. It was failing. Our power was shut off 2 days before my wedding. That's how poor we were. Like, we didn't always have food. I didn't ever have socks. I had like 3 pairs of underwears my senior year, 3 pairs of underwear my senior year in high school. We were so poor. And my dad didn't get his temple recommend because he hadn't paid tithing. So the bishop did that just as an example. Dude, you're not going to pay tithing. You could be your own daughter's wedding. There were no sins. There was nothing there. Like, my parents have both said for decades that they could not believe that that bishop would not. And it was like the week before my wedding, they go in to get their temple recommends. And the bishop was like, either you make up the tithing that you haven't paid for the past 3 years. This was 1995. So I don't know. Bishops today might treat this a little bit differently. He's like, either you make up some of the tithing, give me this lump sum right now. And it was, I don't know, $400 or $500 or something. My parents did not have it. My parents could not buy groceries. My parents could not pay their electric bill. So with the house full of wedding guests, their powers shut off. And it was
my God.
devastating. And yeah, so my mom and dad, while I got married in the Portland, Oregon temple, were sitting outside the temple, like outside the entrance. As we left the temple that day, my mom and dad are sitting on this little bench like they're fucking criminals
Yeah.
because they have tithing to this now $100 billion mega church.
Yeah. Yeah. Anonymous wanted to know what I meant by essay. I can't say it on TikTok, but think of something that rhymes with great.
I've done so many videos about that. I want to write my dad's own like biography when I get done with my book. And just kind of showcase what the Mormon church did to this poor man who had been the victim of all kinds of abuse in his childhood, who had had a terrible life, joins the church thinking that now he has this amazing community, and it did such horrible things to him. I was his first daughter, and my dad was not allowed to be at my wedding. My dad was the Sunday school president at the time. So every Sunday, he's running the Sunday school. My mom was in the primary. They were leaders in the church, and
We labor, but that doesn't count towards your tithing.
yeah. So they couldn't go to my wedding. My wedding was like my seminary teacher, the bishop, Jake, some of his mission companions. There was nobody at my wedding. It was so sad.
My ex-mother-in-law got remarried while I was still married to my ex, and his aunt she's ex-Mormon as well. And I was sitting out taking care of all of the kids while everybody else is inside for this wedding. And she walked up to me and she just told me, I know that this feels terrible right now. This feels like the worst thing that you could ever imagine. And you have every right to be angry. But I promise you, it's going to get better. And just remember, you're the only one being honest because none of them want to actually look at the reality of what they're in there defending. And so the fact that you're here means that you're the only one willing to tell the truth.
I love that. I agree with that. That it's not easy.
It's not. It's not.
And you do a good job. Okay, Kevin opened my door a minute ago. We're supposed to be decorating our Christmas.
He's almost here, so I have to go too.
I don't celebrate Christmas because I'm an atheist, and I think I'll be talking with Britt Hartley about that next week. I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. It's Indigenous Remembrance Day. I wear black, and I go to a Hohokam site, the Tohono O'odham, and there's a little hike that you can do by San Javier here. And I wear black all day to remember what my colonizing European ancestors did to the First Nations when they invaded America. That's my Thanksgiving.
I'm not having Thanksgiving because nobody around me can handle my son being disabled and messing up their perfect holidays.
Beth, that makes me so sad.
But I'll wear black too.
Just celebrate yourself being history. But I'm going to put up my midwinter tree that my German ancestors put up in years past, long before Christianity invaded their land. So
I love that. I love that. Well, you have fun.
That you were absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for talking. Everybody, please go follow Beth Magnetic. Check out her YouTube too, which is the same title, Mormon True Crime. And if you'd like to rewatch this video and see the beginning where we talk about some of the influences underneath Mormon influencers, then that'll be over on my YouTube and a couple other places.
So next week I will have better lighting.
Okay, Smarty Pants. Thanks for the discussion.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.